Good morning. It's Monday, July 25th, 2022. I've got two segments to cover, and I got to jam them all into one episode today, and I do apologize for that. But they kind of go hand in hand. First segment is a report that I'm going to be relaying. I know it's something that I usually do when I find out in the media articles and stuff, and it's usually stuff concerning Texas, because that's where this broadcast is. But this is very much the exception. Coming out of China Uncensored, a reporter by the name of Chris Chappell. Headline: China is buying American farmland, undercutting U.S. food supply chains, and possibly creating bioweapons. Ooh, sounds very interesting. Out of a collection of a bunch of opinions and people's professional reports, starting with Wall Street Journal, the opinion section. Between 2011 and 2020, China bought nearly 7 million hectares of farmland around the world. Hectare, for what it's worth, is a metric unit of square measure, equaling 100 acres. 100 acres makes a hectare. And 100 acres that makes a hectare is 2.471 acres. 2.471 acres. Now in square meters, it's 10,000. That's a 10,000 count. But we're here in the U.S., we identify them by acreage. And it's 2.471 acres, okay, which universally is called a hectare. Okay, 7 million hectares was bought by China. Okay, the U.S. and Japan firms bought less than 1 million hectares, and the U.K. bought nearly 2 million hectares. Okay. So China bought this large chunk of land, 7 million hectares. Although currently Bill Gates has bought up the most U.S. farmland, China shows that it's following behind him. For example, North Dakota. But here's the alarming part: in North Dakota farmland, only 12 miles from the United States Air Force drone base, you know, housing the most sophisticated drone technology. You know, China, under the permissions of CCP, bought land 12 miles, just 12 miles away from this Air Force base. Okay, now it bought it through a company which got permission from CCP. The company is called Fufeng Group, and Fufeng Group is a company that specializes in flavor enhancers and sugar substitutes. They bought the land for $2.6 million. Now, that's all fine. It's all commerce. It's all capitalism. But experts believe this. This would present a costly national security risk, causing grave damage to U.S. strategic advantages. End quotation. Even Democratic Senator Mark Warner of Virginia, the chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, claims we should be seriously concerned about Chinese investment locations close to sensitive sites such as military bases around the U.S. Sounds very reasonable in my opinion. But as I move on, the USDA claims China owns 352,140 acres of farmland, which, don't get me wrong, it's less than 1% of all foreign land held. Foreign land held overall is 2.7% of acres in the United States. Okay, so it looks harmless with China owning only less than 1% of American soil, farmlands. The U.S.-China Economic Security Review Commission posted in May 26th of 2022 the author Lauren Greenwood, political analyst in security and foreign affairs, she brought up about 5 concerns that should be brought up and paid attention to. Okay, foreign-owned land near military bases, like the one 12 miles away from the U.S. Air Force drone base, you know, that's a concern. Info on Chinese censorship. Oh, excuse me. Sorry. Info on Chinese ownership of U.S. agricultural land lacks transparency. Okay, that's concern number 2. And here's an example. One of the meanings is like, one of these categories includes other land, which is swamps, marshes, and bare rock land. Okay. Other land makes up 78% of Chinese purchases, so that doesn't sound too bad. But here's the niche. Okay, here's the catch. The USDA requires foreign buyers to report it, but lack of enforcement makes it easy for the owners to neglect their duties, their responsibilities. Okay, so we've got Chinese owning 78% of their land being other land, which is neglected land even by US standards. However, whoever owns that land has to report what it is that they're doing on that land, should they be doing it, but doesn't have the enforcement to back it up. So whatever is being done on these other land categories, these categories that fall under other land, it's not being reported, and it's being neglected to be reported by the Asian landowners. The CCP might have some leverage. Oh, this is concern number 3. The CCP, now you notice they say the CCP, not the Asians, not the Chinese, not the Philippines, especially for that douchebag yesterday who finally got convicted, who finally got sentenced to jail, charges pressed on him for beating a 67-year-old Philippine woman, punching her 100 times, causing head damage, brain damage. Okay, the CCP, however, that guy was a dumbass. These people here that are looking at what the people with power, the Chinese with power, are actually doing. They might have some leverage over the U.S. supply chain if this keeps going. One of the examples was the medical supplies that were just plain worthless throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. Okay, we wound up cutting a lot of ties with them because of the fact that their masks were worthless, their breathalyzers were worthless, their machines that keep the lungs in the air and all this good stuff, keep them breathing while the coronavirus was messing up their lungs. Worthless, all of it worthless. They were all just manufactured, tinker-totted equipment that wound up not being able to sustain capabilities in helping the infected survive. That's one example of the the CCP leverage over medical supplies. Okay, people were hurting, people were dying, and we had nobody but ourselves to blame because we trusted factories in China, you know, that are run, governed, and owned by the CCP, who brought us these pieces of crap medical supplies. Okay, now switching that, imagine the power they'd have if CCP controlled the food we eat. Sticking to the subject of them buying the farmland and undercutting U.S. food supply chains. And what I mean by that is exactly what was reported back in May 29th, the year 2013, by Bill Chappell on NPR America. That's just the credits because I don't have a studio. I can't post the credits at the end of the show. Smithfield Foods to be sold to Chinese firm for $4.72 billion. Now this is what took place in 2013. Smithfield Foods, the largest pork producer in the U.S., sold their company to China, a Chinese company. That, of course, every company in China has to have permission to do so by the CCP, and more than likely they're administered by them, and if not actually owned by the CCP. China got 146,000 acres of the U.S. land, scattered across 6 states here in the U.S. After the deal, they bought up a number of process facilities, farms, grain elevators, and other U.S. assets that allowed the company to cut out many American supplies and service providers. Okay, so the process companies that like the butcher shops that pull out the pork portions, the process companies that package them, the farms where this is all done, the grain that feeds the pigs, and any other U.S. company that makes, for example, this pork product through the largest pork producer in history in U.S. Okay, they also bought those companies that were doing the processing and all this for Smithfield Foods, and they wound up firing a lot of people. I don't know the numbers yet. I just got this information yesterday, so I haven't really found out yet as to how much of a loss we had to endure while this company backed by the CCP profited on. Okay, now that was the third concern, and as written by the report. The fourth is the Chinese theft of U.S. agricultural IP threatens U.S. competitive advantage, crop development, and agricultural technology innovation. The U.S. leads genetic modified crops of the industry. Okay. China, according to a lot of people say, is stealing the data. Now, that might be a stretch, but it might also not be. There could be some people that have infiltrated the businesses and stole actual data on how to make genetic modified crops. Okay. More nutritious, more protein, more nutrient, more vitamin of whatever crops that crop produces. Genetic modified. Usually one of the things is genetic modified organisms, which everybody is aware of as GMO. That's a different thing. However, it is germane to what we are saying here when it comes to just simply genetic modified crops, and I'll get to that. For right now, copycats are around. They do copy what we do, and they modify it themselves, tweak it, twerk it to their own nature or their own side of the world, be it in Europe, the South Americas, Asia, Russia, even Australia. They all have a time zone, which a hemisphere, a portion of the earth, where their atmo and environment runs a certain way. So they see what the genetic modified crops that we built, copy it, modify it to their surroundings, their lands, and produce their own great nutritious crops, no differently than we do here. The concern on this report is that China is not only copycatting, they're stealing our data, taking it. And then to top it all off, they're doing it on acres that they own, U.S. acres that they own. You know, in this case, concerning 148,000 acres in 6 states. And also as far as farmland goes, the farmland that they bought $2.6 million for. But again, it's a concern given the fact that it's 12 miles outside of an Air Force base, the drone making Air Force base, the drone producing Air Force base. A little concern here. Now, does that mean that they're going to take weapons? It's possible. So how is bioweapon into this? Well, that refers back to the GMOs, genetic modified organisms, which leads to the 5th concern. The potential weaponization of GMOs, genetic modified organisms, like GM seeds, also poses a threat to U.S. economy and food security, which would be a risk if GM seed code is used to create a bioweapon. Get this, okay, the commentator himself dumbed this down for us, claiming China could conduct biowarfare by creating some type of blight that could destroy U.S. crops. For example, biotechnology experts have recognized that fungal spores can be used as a biological warfare agent to target staple crops. That could cause a famine. That could cause a famine, and that's the way it's being used as a weapon. Starvation is one of the most totally disrespectful and totally dishonorable forms of genocide that has been used on quite a few countries in Africa, South Africa, Israel, Poland, even in certain parts of Russia and China, the country of China itself, done by the CCP, the organization that runs China. As I stated through many of these posts from the past, stop hating Asians, you're hating the wrong people. China starved many of their own, the CCP has starved many of their own Chinese people. Okay, there's even file footage that has been released to the worldwide media on the net where this backhoe was being used to push a whole herd of pigs into a pit where they were then buried alive and eliminated at the risk of having of being infected with being carriers of COVID-19, which would be the coronavirus stronger than the coronavirus that we used to know as swine flu. Okay, because that's what they are. They're all coronaviruses. But the swine flu only affected the pigs, our pork, and was a risk to humans once it started to become a carrier of COVID-19. At least that's what the CCP said. And so they ordered all those pigs to be killed and buried alive. And pig farmers wound up suffering. And that's just in China. So it's quite possible the reason why they could afford to do that is because of the pig farm that we have here in the U.S. that they own from as far back as 2013. You see what I'm saying? It's possible. I don't know that yet. I'm not an investigator. I'm not a federal investigator. I'm just a rideshare driver that's reading these facts and passing them along to you. Okay? Just a little reminder. That's the reason why you keep coming to my show. So there it is, a possible biowarfare weapon that could be done through GMOs by way of corrupting the GM seeds, genetic modified seeds, which produce our healthy crops. Done by way of stealing, according to a few experts. It was stolen, our data on how to do the genetic modified crops. You know, after buying, and that's just after buying large portions of land that produce pork and pig farming, which technically we can do by hormonal organisms, you know. But much like the pig farm, all of the genetic modified crops, you know, are being done by permission of the CCP, along with the companies that help produce these genetic modified crops. Everything from science lab splicing, I guess that's what they're doing, seed splicing, all the way down to the fertilizer, the company that provides fertilizer for them. the CCP is authorizing these companies to buy all of those companies that are affiliated with the farming that's going on 12 miles away from the United States Air Force base that produces the most sophisticated drone technology up in North Dakota. Okay, and to top it all off, it's quite possible that this kind of stuff can be done not just off of that farmland, but, don't say but, however, on lands that are categorized as other land, such as swamps where there's plenty of water. All that needs to be is filtered and cleaned for the crops. Marshes and bare rock, you know, where I'm sure plenty of different complications of those land formations make it difficult for the USDA or any other federal agency that's supposed to supervise and make sure that this is all being safely done, safely grown, crops that are safely grown. You know, it complicates, you know, that stuff. Therefore, these so-called companies like Fufeng Group that bought that North Dakota land, you know, and any other company involved in crops growing, particularly genetic modified crops, you know, they're getting away with it. And they're getting away with it, as far as security can tell, under the supervision, if not the exact orders of the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party. So China is buying American farmland, undercutting U.S. Food, soil supply chains, and possibly creating bioweapons. All of it right now is still under speculation, but 2 and 2 does make 22. 2 plus 2 makes 4. We can see the difference. You know, we'd be able to tell. And just to keep everybody calm, just because this is common sense on common ground thinking, please bear in mind, we've caught people like this before. Here in Texas, for example, drill men, businessmen, who was pulling up light natural gas out of Texas, out of our state of Texas, was a former Chinese Communist Party member who had bought millions of acres of land and had light natural gas, Texas light natural gas, drilled, fracked, and all that good stuff, and shipped to China. We saw none of it. Texas, the United States, anybody in relation, no European ally, none of it. We saw none of it. It all got sent straight to China for China's own benefit. Correction, for the Chinese Communist Party's benefit. Nobody in China, everybody over there is suffering gas shortages no differently than we are here in the United States. Okay? Now, the Texas administration wound up stopping that. They put a stop to it. They say no more, and we're not selling land to anybody else that's doing this kind of crap and all this other stuff. Okay? There was another one that I personally cannot remember right now. Ooh, I don't remember. I don't remember, but for right now, the Chinese bought some land, they take over and all this stuff, and I'm pretty sure there's a country, an extra country that I can throw in there that I'm just really not remembering right now, and I do apologize for that, of taking something and depositing it somewhere else. You know, it's said that a lot of stuff has been done like that as well. Diamonds, for one. Now that I'm remembering, diamonds were being dug up out of U.S. soil and being taken to Israel. And I think they really got some slack, only because they actually paid their fair share of taxes and dues to the United States. you know, but that's still an example of what I'm trying to talk about countries doing this. In this case, it's a whole lot more of a concern concerning China, which again is buying farmland, undercutting food supply chains, and having the possibility of creating farmlands, creating bioweapons, and we can't tell because of all the lands that they own, especially other lands where it's just very difficult for us to supervise and keep an eye on. Now, we're going to remain calm because, again, we've stopped people like this from creating problems for this. I remember somebody in the Middle East driving around in New York. He got suspicious of something, and it turns out he was carrying the bubonic plague in his glove box. Okay, and I remember that because he was driving a white, blank white, all white, tinted windowed minivan, a vehicle that at the time I owned. I owned a Plymouth. I owned a Plymouth, and I can't remember what it was called. But I owned a Plymouth minivan, you know, and it had tinted windows and all this good stuff. So it was quite the concern. I was pretty nervous at the time also because, you know, I'm brown skin, no differently than, you know, a Middle Easterner guy. And, you know, this was done in a major city. I'm living here in Texas. You know, I could have easily have been pulled over, you know, pulled over to the side, frisked, thrown on the ground, spread your feet 3 feet wide, spread your legs 3 feet wide, and all this other stuff. And all, you know, I could have had that done to me. I could have been profiled, you know. But America has a way of catching stuff like this and eventually nailing them, you know, stopping them. We stopped the LNG. We're making sure that the diamonds are not being smuggled. Other goods and weapons and stuff. Weapons have been caught. Drugs have been caught along our borders also. So we're still on top of it. This is just to remind you of the complication, not so much the doomsday. The sky isn't falling. I'm not Chicken Little, and I don't want any of you out there. You come to me because you know we don't listen to Chicken Littles. Okay? We hear what's going on, and we just be cool and take a step back. We just keep cool. Unlike the second half of this show, this woman, and I don't know where, she was speaking at a Senate hearing, an administrative building in some state here in the U.S. She didn't have an accent, so this wasn't in another country. This was here in the U.S. in some state legislative building where she stepped up and said, our whiteness is part of the problem of meat eating. If you're just as confused, I understand that. I understand that. I've been reading it and looking over it and reading it again, and I'm still a little confused, but it involves reading out the passage in its entirety and then going through it, breaking it down, okay? Let me just say, she's got the right idea in standing up for herself and being a vegetarian, but she's going at it in the most whacked out ways, okay? Here she is, and I still didn't get a name for it, and I'm not gonna say her name because I know she's more than likely already being subject to ridicule and shamed and just, you know, just getting a hard time for doing this. She went to this building, city building, and said, I believe we should move beyond all meat. The assumption that the best protein comes from corpses is a racist belief. How do you know the animal would have picked you to feed off its corpse? 21st century animal eating requires a complicity in a new colonialism. The events especially affect girls and young women. Your hamburger comes with a dose of misogyny. Popular culture is flooded with references to sexy. Sexy cows, sexy pigs, sexy chickens, sexy fishes, who all just want to have fun. Her words. Meat eating is also one of the ways gender-based structures of oppression are perpetrated. Masculinity a construct of the gender binary facing constant destabilization, feels always under threat, and eating animals is its protection racket. White supremacists weaponize it, eating meat, eggs, and dairy, and of baiting liberal men as so-called soy boys, are all part of the neo-Nazi message. To say you care about animals is considered a sign of weakness in the world that's still committed to the gender binary meat eaters, like anti-abortionists, have forgotten that one quality of non-existence-ness is not having awareness about existence. About existence. Got that? When all else fails, meat eaters assert that animals are not our equals. Now, she says this part, I heard all your laughter, because when she said the neo-Nazi statement, the Nazis calling any man that's liberal a soy boy, everybody busted up laughing. And so she says, I heard all your laughter. I know some of these must be new ideas, or you think they're fringe or whatever. Our whiteness is part of the problem of meat eating. End quotation. Now it's time to break it down while I still got time. I believe we should be beyond all meat. Visual conception idea, nice. Very poetic. The assumption that the best protein comes from the corpses is racist belief. Not quite. Maybe a species species discriminative, but not necessarily a racist, because an animal is not a race, it's a species. How do you know the animal would have picked you to feed off its corpse? How do you know the zebra would have picked every lion to feed off its corpse? You know, I worked in a business that had window walls, and I'm not going to say the business because they suck, but I worked in the break room that had window walls where you could see cats that took food from the workers. One of them climbed up a tree, came down with a baby bird, despite the fact that the mother bird was fighting and pecking at it and all this good stuff. But the cat still walked off with the baby, went behind a bush, and then you just see the huge wave of sadness over the mother bird that went back up to the nest. She just plain gave up after what she saw. Meaning this cat, that was a stray animal house cat, killed a baby bird against its mother's wishes. But how do you know that baby bird wouldn't have picked that cat to feed off its corpse? You see where I'm going with this? You see where I'm going with this? 21st century animal eating requires a complicity in a new colonialism. That's kind of dumb, because a new colonialism, first off, it's just as offensive as the old colonialism. You know, the colonialism that ran my people and my ancients off of their lands, including the natives. These events especially affect girls and young women. Your hamburger comes with a dose of misogyny. Popular culture is flooded with reference to sexy cow, sexy pig, sexy chicken, sexy fishes, who all just want to have fun. Okay, I get that. I get that. And there's a problem with it, though. Advertisements want to put good-looking people in their cow eating, pig eating, chicken eating, fish eating. And you're right. There's always a pretty girl or a beautiful woman or a pretty woman that looks like she's having fun, having a delight eating that food product. Okay? So I get what she's saying. I don't see how it's misogynistic, you know, at the same time. It's borderline gray area, because you don't really see You don't really see her eating a hot dog and inserting it in her mouth, reciprocating it in her mouth before chowing down on it. You know, you don't see her peeling a banana, putting the palm in the back of her head and pushing her head down on the banana, you know. And I know that's a bit extreme, but you get what I'm saying. Advertisements like to put good-looking people on there, pretty girls, pretty ladies, and all this stuff. So it's sort of a catch-22 at that segment of where she's going at, trying to make everybody feel bad for being meat eaters by way of being sexist through our advertisements. And I get it. She's throwing it out there. Now, all that time, you got people in the background, mostly men. I ain't gonna lie, it's mostly men. They're trying to hold in their laughter when she says that, especially the sexy cows, sexy pigs, sexy chicken, sexy fishes, because more than likely the guys back there are picturing a chicken in a lingerie, you know, or a cow in a bikini, you know. What the hell does she mean by that, you know? And it's because we men are, you know, we can be a little limited on our imaginations. Meat eating is also one of the ways gender-based structures of oppression are perpetrated. Okay? We're keeping the women and keeping them pretty women and all this other stuff. Masculinity, a construct of the gender binary facing constant destabilization, feels always under threat, and eating animals is its protection racket. Yeah, there's got to be men. This is what makes us men. Okay, it's a little yes and no, but it's not just men that enjoy eating the meats. White supremacists weaponize it, eating meat, eggs, and dairy, and of baiting liberal men as so-called soy boys as part of their neo-Nazi message. To say you care about animals is considered a sign of weakness in a world still committed to gender binary meat eaters, like anti-abortionists, have forgotten the general... Okay, whoa. I passed that up. Sorry about that. White supremacists weaponizing it. Okay. It's not just the whites that are doing it. I understand that as far as the advertisements where CEOs of food companies are majority white. I get it. And mostly male. It's a male-dominated business, I'm sure. Probably statistics, if I look them up, I'll probably find that to be true. I get it. But there's more than just whites and neo-Nazis that do this. And again, calling liberals, baiting liberals as so-called soy boys, you know, that's where everybody started busting up laughing. You know, it's all a part of this neo-Nazi message. Technically, it's not just the Nazis that are doing this. It's guys of my, you know, I'm a Mexican American. I'm a Tejano, to be more specific. And even here in Texas, we Mexican Americans are you know, we can't help but poke fun a little bit of that. Soy boy, oh baby. You know, we do that also. I personally don't do it out of a belief structure. You know, I do it every now and then as sort of poke fun, haha, and all this stuff. But I don't judge anybody that's a non-meat eater, that doesn't eat meat, eggs, and dairy. You know, which goes back to, how do you know the animal didn't pick you? Technically, we covered the meat. The eggs that we eat have no fetus in them. Okay, the eggs that we eat just have yolk in them. Every egg farmer, every chicken farmer leaves the eggs with the fetus with the mother. The yolk is what we take. The ones with just the yolk is what we take. Okay. There used to be a method of that where if the egg sunk, that means it had a fetus in it, and you put it immediately, you give it immediately back to its mom. If the egg floated, it had a yolk in it, and you take it. And you can't quote me on that. It's just what I think I remember. Dairy. Cows have milk no matter what. Okay? And they don't have a problem with you milking them. They'll stand still for that. Okay, and that might be part of the answer of picking picking a person. Moving on, to say that you care about animals that are considered a sign of weakness. It still committed the gender binary meat eaters, like anti-abortionists, have forgotten that one quality of non-existence-ness is not having awareness about existence. Okay, I get what they're saying. You know, you can't be ignorant to this, your beliefs, your religious beliefs and all that, but that's kind of a catch-22 also. That's kind of calling the kettle black if you're going after every meat eater by way of racism, sexism, immoral cannibalism, and corporate greed, you know, and immoral inhumane stereotyping, you know, like abortionists, for example. You know, you're sort of categorizing people while accusing meat eaters for categorizing people for not being meat eaters. Okay, that's sort of a catch-22, you know. And I do apologize for having to point that out, because I see her heart is in the right place, but her mind is just so whacked, you know. She's trying to stick up for the non-meat eaters, and I get it. I get it. You know, she's trying to stick up for the animals. I get it. She's trying to stick up for decency. I get it. I get it. You know, it's fine. But again, she's doing it at such a whacked level. Continuing, when all else fails, meat eaters assert that animals are not equals. We have to believe that in order to do so. Now, because of the laughter, she said, I heard all your laughter. I know some of these must seem like new ideas, and you think they're fringe or whatever. Our whiteness is part of the problem of meat eating. You know, again, bless your heart, you know, but you know, you're sticking to your gender, you're sticking to your nationality, you're sticking to your race, your ethics, your ethnicity. Okay, you're sticking to it, and I get it. I get it. Kudos on that part. There's a lot of us out here that I wish we could say, you know, let's stop, you know, let's keep on making use of the cow, which technically we do. But there's some people that throw away a lot of the food, a lot of the parts, and all this good stuff. So I see what you're saying. Even though our perspectives are different, but it's just so left field. It's just so curveball that you know, she's gotta understand it's falling on deaf ears in the end, at the end of it all. Okay, it's falling on deaf ears at the end of it all. Hitting at it at a humanitarian level, at a you know, historic colonialism, the threat of a nationalist colonialism, hitting it at a sexual level. It's all, your hamburger comes with a dose of misogyny, you know, sexy beef, sexy pigs, sexy fishes, girls that just want to have fun. So it's a sexist thing, you know. Masculinity, you always feels it's under threat. You got little wieners. You got little penises. You're afraid everybody's gonna find out you got small penises. You meat eaters, you meat eaters that eat eggs and dairy, and who are white supremacists. You know, and again, really the only angle that makes sense about the white supremacist part is the fact that almost all of the businesses are white owned, and white dominated in the administrations, and you know, the treasury, the CEO, the sales, the consultants, and all that. You know, I get it. Our whiteness is a part of the problem. Okay, technically there is another politically incorrect thing. Your whiteness means your method of being white. I got to stick up for the majority of the Anglos on this one. There's a reason why they're not neo-Nazis or joining American Front or the Proud Boys. It's because the whiteness that's sort of tinted with anger, which leads to hate, which leads to these incidences that we read about. These incidences, enactments of hate that are performed in the form of gun, in the form of fights, in the form of pickets and riots and shootings. That part, you're sort of wrong. This lady is sort of wrong. Your whiteness is part of the problem of meat eating. Whiteness, of being white, is still not neo-Nazism. Of being white is still not being of Sovereign Sons organization. Whiteness is still not a part of the KKK or Proud Boys or neo-Nazism. Hate groups concerning them. Okay? And big props, once again, big props from this Mexica descendant, Ha'il, which is truth in Mayan, you know, because I've got a lineage going that far back. You know, truth. Whiteness is nothing to do with these neo-Nazis. That's the tint. That's the off-white. That's the anger-driven people that just happen to be white. So as far as our whiteness is part of the problem of meat eating, I have to sort of disagree with that. I get what she's saying. I get what she's saying. It's very interesting, you know. But again, she's gone through so many different angles. She's gone left field, you know. She's throwing curveballs, so to say. And it's funky. It is funky. The entire speech that she just did, it was funky. It was just plain funky. You know, okay. Well, coming back to the coming back to the show, whether you're believing these myths that tie up, whether you believe in all of this stuff that's tied up by way of all these different avenues, sexism, economic greed, hate beliefs, and stereotype weakness and sexism and all this stuff, whether you're at that level of thinking that there's a problem, or at this level of the Chinese actual buying land and actual cutting out supply chains and actual looking more and more like they're capable of making a weapon, you know, based on the facts at hand. The moral of this segment here is to take a step back and remember, just remember, there are people who care. There are people with a lot of heart, but their minds just need to snap out of it. Their minds are going way out there. Their minds are getting whacked. And it falls along the same lines as that doomsday stuff, thinking that we're about to get conquered and invaded and genocided by another country just because they're buying American. You know, they're well, in this case, buying American farmlands, buying American produce lands, buying American poultry lands, poultry farms, you know, and in some cases buying land that's too difficult to see. We're too difficult to keep an eye on. Too difficult to see. You don't know what are they doing. Okay? Just remember that we still have a real good record of keeping on top of this. You know, 9/11 aside, you know, we caught the America catches guys with carrying bubonic plague and other germ warfare ingredients. You know, America has caught smugglers. America has caught and rescued traffickers that rescued a total of 70 kids that were being trafficked, you know, within a small time period, from south of the border in Juarez as far north as Colorado and as far centered in West and Northern Texas. Okay, 70 children rescued. You know, and those are trafficked migrant kids that were put up for sale. Okay, we're catching that. Here in Texas, we caught the guy that was drilling light natural gas, and we were, for the longest time, not seeing any of us. But we started following the U.S. started following the trail of all these boats that are coming out of the Rio Grande Passage, and lo and behold, it's gas that's you know, not recorded, recognized. It's all being drilled out and smuggled to the CCP, to CCP's China. Okay, not even China, just to the CCP for their usage. You know, we're still on top of catching these people, of catching these organizations. Okay, and at some extent, you've got people that are trying to go to brainwashing you with these so-called all these avenues combined into one, which just makes it look like we're doomed. We're all doomed, you know. But you come to this channel because you also know these wacky people. You also have heard some angle of some possible threat, and you're listening to me and sharing information and stuff. If you haven't yet, by all means do so. I'm putting the email. I'm writing the email because I don't really have an office phone. I'm doing this on my lunch break again. I only have an email for you to share your information with, and for me to pass the information on. That being said, it's all about just keeping cool. It's all just keep cool, and always take a step back and seeing what's going on. Okay, that's what the reason for bringing up these two extreme subjects and viewpoints. You know, one or the other, which sort of coincide as the same thing. You know, be aware. Be aware. We've got these things going on, and in some journalistic viewpoint, it's going this way. In some conspiracy theory, it's going that way, where dots are sort of being connected, but nowhere near as much as the journalistic viewpoint. So that's it right now. I've already surpassed my time. I'm actually surprised that I'm still being recorded. But for right now, everybody, I hope you're staying safe. I hope you're still taking care of each other and looking out for each other. And remember, no matter how bad everything's looking, you got to hold and maintain and keep the faith. We got an inflation going on, so we're reducing ourselves from udon noodles to ramen noodles. We're looking at Bertelli to Chef Boyardee. We're moving from fresh produce to canned goods and packages and all this good stuff. And we're making every dollar stretch as we go along. We're trying to make every dollar stretch. We're budgeting. We're doing all this stuff. This will pass. We occasionally go through this from time to time. This will pass, and we will triumph again. So hang in there. Okay? Let's all just keep our cool. Let's all be cool and keep our cool and keep moving on. We got to keep on keeping on, and that's it. So we'll catch y'all later. This is Chris with Chris's Comments, signing out.